Just out of curiosity, did anybody go last year? You did? Okay. You must have enjoyed it because you're back. Thank you very much. Oh, hang on. Can you all hear me okay? Yeah. All right. So I'm going to give you a little bit of information about the Edwardsburg Cemetery. It used to be the Pleasant Lake Edwardsburg Cemetery. All right. Is that better? Okay, hold on. I've got it up as high as it will go. Is that any better? All right, and I'll try to yell a little bit also. Okay, so it used to be the Pleasant Lake Edwardsburg Cemetery. It was not in the village, so it was established by Andrus Township. And in between 1829 and 1831, Edwardsburg was platted as a town, at which time the cemetery changed to Edwardsburg Cemetery. And it was established mid-1830s. So, interesting fact, you might see some headstones that have dates prior, can you hear me? That have dates prior to 1834. Those are likely family members that passed out east. The family wanted to commemorate them on their family headstone, so they had their names, birth and death dates engraved. The first people, unfortunately, that were buried in the cemetery were two very young boys. Samuel Bacon was 2 when he passed, and James K. Shanahan was 1. And then August 2nd, 1837, Sally Olmsted passed, and she was among another to be buried first in the cemetery. The cemetery houses 1 Revolutionary veteran, 36 Civil War veterans, 14 World War I veterans, and 57 World War II veterans. So an interesting fact, if there is a coin on the headstone, it means that a person visited that deceased person, soldier, and it lets their family know that someone came to pay their respects. So a penny meant that they visited, a nickel meant that they trained in boot camp together, and a dime meant that at some point during their service they served together. So we are going to be visiting 6 cemeteries, those of George Andrus, Dr. John Sweetland, Lois Keller, Mary Catherine Morse, Robert Mette, and Joanne Boepple. Because of the walking distance, we want to make sure everyone's safe. So for the first 2 cemeteries that we visit, you will stay on the wagon. You will be right at the grave site. You will be able to hear the presenter. We're going to go from the first to the second. Same scenario. And then we're going to go across the cemetery to the last 4. At that point, you will get off the wagon. There will be chairs for those that need to sit. And the presenters will then tell you about the people there. Now, I have to ask that you stay with the tour at all times because the wagon is on a schedule and we have to get back. So if you want more information about the cemetery, you can go to the Edwardsburg Village website. There's a cemetery tab. You can click on that, and there is a link called Red Book. Red Book gives the map of the cemetery along with all of the people buried there. So it's an excellent resource for you. All right. I am going to be quiet, if you can believe that. You probably see me talking all morning. But when we get to the cemetery, I'll give you further instructions when they're needed, okay? Any questions? Okay, awesome.
Wonderful. Great.
Magical.
Well, I'd like to introduce myself, if I may. I'm Dr. John B. Sweetland. I was born in Dryden Township, Tompkins County, New York, on July the 4th, 1834. I led a most enjoyable life here in Edwardsburg, but I wasn't born here. It certainly was fun growing up in New York. I spent most of my youth there with my 7 brothers and sisters. We all received a common education, and after graduation, I taught school for several terms. After which I found out that that really would not be my life's calling. Up a little higher?
Please.
Okay, everybody hear me now? Okay. Yeah, I found out that that would not be my life's calling. So then I went ahead and went into Central New York University, where I studied pre-med. From there I went to Buffalo University, and where I graduated in 1861 with honors from the medical school. And thus begins my connection to Michigan. My oldest sister, who was 12 years my senior, Eveline, had married Dr. Levi Aldrich and moved west to the frontier state of Michigan in 1850, and there they were well established and were some of the leading citizens. And after graduation, I decided for a little adventurous trip to go visit them. I stayed with them for several months and got very familiar with the area and realized that this is a place that I actually wanted to live. At that time, the government was involved and embroiled in the Civil War, so I thought it my civic duty to go ahead and enlist. So in August of 1862, I enrolled as a private in the M Company of the 4th Michigan Infantry, and we were sent to Kentucky. In October of 1862, we found ourselves involved in the Battle of Perrysburg. That was really a decisive battle for the Union, as that was the last time that the South tried to gain control of Kentucky. My medical license essentially was put into much practice, as 7,600 men in that battle either died, were injured, or were missing. After that, I was sent then to Louisville, where I was put in charge of the surgical ward in the hospital. And there I stayed until the end of the war in 1865. I had then been mustered out. I returned to Edwardsburg and then opened my practice. At that point, I essentially had a practice for 2 years when in February 19th of 1868, I married my wife, who would be a Frances Bacon, her father being one of the early pioneers of Antwa Township. We had a wonderful marriage and a wonderful family life. We were blessed with 4 children, the youngest being Johnny. Unfortunately, Johnny at the age of 7 had a fall and he passed away. In 1874, I was sent by the voters of Cass County up to the Michigan State Legislature, whereas I served, and I also ran unsuccessfully several years later for the State Senate, after which I returned home and began continued my practice. In 1879, I took on a new occupation. I decided that publishing would be kind of fun, so I purchased in February 6th of 1879 the Edwardsburg Argus. I became the owner, editor, and publisher of that. At time of purchase, there was approximately 600 circulations of the paper, which brought about some changes to the building of the Argus. I had to reconfigure the building construction for the fact that I continued my practice, which was on the first floor. I had had some oak cabinetry made, the first one being 12 foot wide, 8.5 foot tall, which held all of my medical equipment. I also had a large desk manufactured, which would have many slots and pigeonholes for all of my forms. On the second floor was used for publishing of the Argus. Typesetting was done by hand in metal frames, which were then put into the printing press, after which the paper would be removed, put on large tables for the ink to set, and then folded and then sent out. It also became somewhat of a forum for me to voice my opinions. Oh, no laughing there. No, I was tenacious in my beliefs, but I always did listen to others and did respect their opinions. One reason or one subject of my opinions was this very cemetery. It was very disorganized, and the care of the system was somewhat sketchy. So with many of my editorials, the community came together and formed a cemetery board, which then hired a sexton to take care and maintain these grounds. In 1888, there was a violent storm that proceeded through Edwardsburg. The main force went down Main Street. My wife and I had built a house on Pleasant Lake on the south side. It was a 2-story brick, but the force of the storm actually took off the roof, caved in one wall, and also removed the roof of our barn. Fortunately, no one was hurt, even though there were many buildings or businesses and trees demolished down Main Street. The storm came through at approximately 11 o'clock at night, and most everyone was home. So fortunately, there was not even one injury. I served the community of Edwardsburg until February 19th of 1999. It was my 31st wedding anniversary. I was 64 years old when I passed away. The community put together a very nice funeral. The service was held at home. The Antwa Lodge of Oddfellows put on a very nice service, and we had a fantastic ceremony here where I was laid to rest 125 years ago. I was very honored that a Sweetland Award had been put out in my name for community service, but more so, I think I am very proud of the fact that the cemetery board that we formed still continues today to maintain and make sure that we have a very beautiful cemetery. I thank you very much for your attendance today and wish you a very fine day.
Good job. That's good.
In honor of Dr. Sweetland's service, we will place a penny saying that we have visited so his family knows that he was respected.
You guys have a great day. Thank you for coming again.
Thank you very much.
I have a riddle for you. What is black and white and red all over?
Newspaper.
Very good, thank you. Yeah, and I just happen to know a little bit about printing the news. My name is George Andrus. I was born on October 13th, 1883, not with a silver spoon in my mouth, but rather with a press pass in my pocket. My brother Charles and I learned the newspaper business at a young age from an anthony of our father, Henry. Let me give you a little family background. My grandfather, James H. Andrus, was born in Antwa Township. Excuse me, scars. On the north bank of Eagle Lake in 1837. He served in the 2nd Michigan Cavalry of the Civil War. My grandparents had 4 children, Cora, Henry, William Riley, and George. My father, Henry, attended schools in Mason and Calvin Townships and high school in Edwardsburg. Now you may be wondering, how did we get involved in the news industry? Well, here's the scoop. In 1875, Edwardsburg was growing rapidly with a population of 415. There were 3 dry goods stores, 2 drugstores, a meat market, a harness shop, and 3 lumber yards. The newspaper in town was first published in 1874 as the Edwardsburg Index. The editor, Mr. Milton Edmiston, however, had very little business sense, and by September of 1875, both he and some of the printing equipment mysteriously vanished. October 5th, 1875, the Index building was bought by a William Shaw and renamed the Edwardsburg Argus. Over the course of 4 years, the paper had 3 different editors, until finally, in 1879, Dr. John Sweetland bought the Argus. Dr. Sweetland ran his medical practice on the ground floor of the Argus building, and Father worked as editor of the paper in the upstairs until 1899, when Dr. Sweetland died. Father bought the building, and that is where my story begins. I was 16. Charles and I helped typeset the heavy frames, and then had to, ever so carefully, carry them up the steep, narrow stairs to the printing press. At first, the paper was just one sheet folded, and the two outside pages came pre-printed from Chicago with the national news. We then filled the inside pages with the local stories and advertisements. Now on October 4th, 1908, I married Zendella Truitt, and she quickly became a valuable asset to the news desk by broadening our story base. In those days, everybody liked to know what everybody else was doing. Sound familiar? We ran stories on birthday parties, housewarmings, picnics in the park, excursions to South Bend, and who arrived or departed on the train to and from Chicago. We had correspondence from May Street, Adamsville, Granger, and Mason Township, that is. And they got their paper free, and everybody else had to pay up to $1, and that was per year for a subscription. Little inflation since. They got their paper free. Okay, here we go. The post office was always a good place to get a lead on a story, and we used to joke that everybody in town was a reporter. When Father died in 1918, I took over as editor. And then sometime in the 1950s, we stopped buying the pre-printed pages from Chicago, and we filled our paper with local stories of interest and advertisements. Zendella and I retired in 1953. Charles followed in 1959, and the paper was sold to the Vigilant. As a side note, what began as a hobby for me became somewhat of an archive to Edwardsburg. I loved taking pictures, and from 1900 to 1920, I took over 300 glass plate negatives of people and places in and around Edwardsburg. Sadly, none of them were ever printed in the Argus, as we didn't have the capability to print pictures, but they are now all housed in the museum in Edwardsburg. I guess being an editor opened doors for me. I served as president, clerk, and trustee of Edwardsburg. I was an honorary member of the Lions Club and involved in the Methodist Church. Looking back, I think I was kind of like your modern day social media. Our Argus was rather like your Facebook, and in my 75 years, I was friends with the whole town, for which I am forever grateful. Thank you. And there's like four albums, right?
My father used to say, you only live once, and if you do it right, once is enough. I am Lois Keller, and I was born on May 1st, 1907, to Arthur and Mary Bullock. I was number 4 of their 5 children. I don't really remember my oldest brother because he was killed in an accident with a horse before I was born. Then there was Robert. My brother Robert was 9 years older than me. Then came Fred. Fred and I were constant companions. And then later, our baby sister, Carol. We lived on the Stafford Farms near Muncie, Indiana. Living on a farm is the absolute best place to grow up. It's hard work. There's a lot to do on a farm. But it brought our family closer together. It was great having my father home all day, every day. I remember when I was a little girl, something upset me terribly, and I ran out to the fields where he was working, and he stopped what he was doing, and he pulled out his big blue bandana handkerchief and dried my tears and told me everything was going to be all right. My father loved to read, and he would read us stories from the Farmer's Guide and also from great books like those that Charles Dickens wrote. he sang us silly songs. I love to hear him sing his silly songs, and he would recite his memorized poems for us. Our mother was very proud of us and expected the best out of us all the time. Once in a while we got a little out of line, and she would quickly remind us of our Baptist and Quaker upbringing. One of my favorite memories of my mother was the fact that she, whether she was working in the garden or whether she was making our meal for the dinner that night, she would burst into song and sing "Oh, Beulah Land" at the top of her lungs. My mother was a teacher, and so she enjoyed helping us with our homework. Now, living on a farm, we had every pet imaginable. There were lambs, pigs, chickens, geese, ducks, even a blue jay and a raccoon. We had a horse, Ginger. I loved Ginger. Ginger must have taken us hundreds of miles in the wagon to the store, to church, to visit relatives, friends, and we loved it. We loved her. And it didn't matter what kind of weather that she hauled us in, she was always very willing to do it. Well, of all the dogs we had, and we had quite a few dogs, Brownie was my best, my favorite. I'll never forget the day that the minister came to visit, and she bit him because he got too close to her puppies. Anyhow, I finally graduated from high school, and I attended Ball State College for 2 years. Later, I met my husband, John Keller, and we had 3 children. Our family grew to include 9 grandchildren and 11 great-grandchildren. Well, in 1956, my husband John retired from the Bendix Corporation in South Bend, and we moved to Edwardsburg, Michigan. In 1957, I became the town librarian at the Edwardsburg branch of the Cass County District Library. What a job for somebody that loves books. It was the perfect job for me. I love books, and I love the people that love the books. They would come in, and I became known in 25 years as the story lady. And I also read stories to the little children that would come into the library. Lots of fun. I loved it. Along with being a librarian, I was a Girl Scout leader for 23 years. It was wonderful teaching young girls leadership skills, community spirit. We learned together how to do so many different things. And I loved it. Now, through my active life, I did earn some special honors. Woman of the Year for Beta Sigma Phi. Thank you. Cass County's Senior Citizen of the Year. Monday Evening Club. And I also founded the Cass County Genealogical Society, through which I earned a trip to England. It was great. However, my real claim to fame came in 1981. On that one day, I was kidnapped by an armed bandit. What? Yes, armed bandit. I was on my way to the library to open it up, and I was stopped at a stop sign when this man jumped into my little red Volkswagen, and he demanded that I drive him to South Bend. Well, I declined, and he put a gun to my head. What was I to do? I had to think fast. I have a library to open. I didn't have time to drive him or anybody else to South Bend. So I did the first thing that came to my mind. I drove through the stop sign into the path of an oncoming car. Fortunately, there was no collision, but I had just enough time to jump out of my car, stand in the middle of the street, and scream, "Help! I'm being kidnapped! Help me!" Well, Mr. Bandit, I guess, was so startled that he quickly exited my car, and he ran willy-nilly up the street to Section Street. Later, he was apprehended on Section Street in the home of Tom and Marge Bray. Now, Marge cleverly was able to motion to the police, who were everywhere in town right now, that someone was in her house. So everything ended well. And I was only 3 minutes late to open up the library. Well, I guess growing up on a farm and being introduced to reading and books really shaped my world and my lifelong love of books. I really think my father would agree that I had lived my life right the first time. All 82 years of it. Yeah, I thank all of you for coming today, and I hope you find some good books to read, and I hope you keep on reading. You won't regret it. Thank you.
Well, it was 1915, 109 years ago. Woodrow Wilson was president. The millionth Ford had run off the assembly line. Gas was 12 cents a gallon. And I, Mary Catherine Morse, a native of this village, was born and lived here until my passing, January 6, 2014, at 98 years old. Now, my family always had a connection to the village. My grandfather opened a general store on the main corner of the village in 1884. When he retired, my dad took over the store, and then later, my husband and I ran the store until its close in 1950s. Bob and I added a modern convenience to the store, frozen food lockers. My friends and I were always active and looking for fun. Of course, we knew about Charles Lindbergh and his famous flight over the Atlantic to France in 1927. We were impressed with his bravery. Of course, we were also impressed with how handsome he looked. But on New Year's Day in 1928, we were excited to hear that his mother, who was flying back from Mexico, was forced down because of a blizzard right here in Edwardsburg. Well, word spread quickly around the village, and so I gathered up some of my friends, and we went down where Mrs. Lindbergh had a room over the drugstore. Well, we started to yell, "We want to see Mrs. Lindbergh!" Well, she finally stepped out, probably because she wanted some peace and quiet, and she waved to us. Well, that was my experience with seeing a celebrity. I graduated from Edwardsburg in 1933 and married Bob Morse in 1935. Bob and I had 2 daughters, Marty and Ruth Ellen. Bob was a very good baseball player, and we would cheer him on at the Allington games, and also we would support his calls when he was an umpire. Bob and I were married for 50 years until his passing. I greatly enjoyed the company of others. I was involved with the Eastern Star, the Monday Evening Club, the Cass County Historical Society, and the Chamber of Commerce. As a member of the Chamber of Commerce, I co-sponsored the first Miss Edwardsburg contest in 1957. I was a lifelong member of the Hope United Methodist Church and was active in their chicken and biscuit dinners for many years. I'm thinking maybe some of you might remember those yummy biscuits and chicken. I also helped organize the first all-school reunion. Now, when I heard that a museum was being organized, I joined in the effort and became a charter member. I regularly attended the meetings and shared my stories of Edwardsburg and of the past, as well as my family's scrapbooks and stories. When the museum ladies decided that they were going to do witches on the porch at Halloween, well, I grabbed a black robe, painted my face green. The kiddies and I loved it. Now, sometimes people's eyes kind of glazed over when I started to tell my stories, but I always enjoyed sharing those memories about what Edwardsburg was like back in the good old days. So I appreciate all of you coming, and I hope your eyes aren't too glazed over. Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
I see a few familiar faces out here in the crowd. It's good to see old friends again. I was probably best remembered as the elementary principal in Edwardsburg for many years. I was once dubbed in an Argus article, it was called the Gentle Giant. I think that kind of stuck with me. And I guess it was kind of true, because being 6'4", I did kind of look like a giant in the elementary school with all the little kids and everything. So it was quite a rewarding career, and I really loved being at the elementary all those years. I actually served in several other capacities, though, at Edwardsburg over the years. I was actually I started off as a high school teacher, and I worked as a coach, and then I was assistant principal and an assistant superintendent, and then finally I ended up retiring as a high school principal. So I had kind of a wide range of positions over the years. I was proud to live in Edwardsburg. I lived in the village for many years. I was proud to serve the community. The fact, though, I was not a lifelong resident of Edwardsburg. I actually was born in Iron Mountain, Michigan, which is up in the UP, and I was raised in neighboring Kingsford, Michigan, right next door. And some of you may remember charcoal briquettes, the Kingsford charcoal. That was the original home of Kingsford charcoal, was Kingsford, Michigan. So that's where I kind of got my start and grew up. I was the middle child of 5 growing up, and I had 2 older brothers and a couple younger sisters. I was growing up during the Depression years, and times were kind of tough economically. Things weren't always easy, but I had a dream to become a teacher one day, and despite the economic rough times, I was able to go to Western Michigan Teacher College in Kalamazoo, which was a long ways from Iron Mountain and Kingsford area. But I was happy to be able to go down and study to be a teacher. My education was interrupted, however, by the start of World War II. During the war, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, I went back home, and my mother pleaded with me not to go into the Army. My 2 older brothers had already signed up, and she was terrified that she was going to lose all 3 of the boys into the war. So she really didn't want me to go, but I just felt like, you know, at that time it was my duty and I had to go. So despite her objections to me going, I ended up signing up and I went into the Army. I eventually became a staff sergeant. I had a lot of different capacities during the war. Kind of towards the end of the war, the combat unit I was in, we were scheduled though to be part of the invasion force into Japan, into the mainland, and they were predicting casualties, of course, to be very high at that time. And so it was a little scary, and a lot of us knew that we may not be coming home from that. And then kind of out of the blue, we'd never heard of a thing called an atomic bomb, but Harry Truman dropped the bombs on Japan, and the war was over, and we were just relieved that the war was finally over and that we were all going home. But unfortunately, Uncle Sam kind of had other ideas for me because my enlistment wasn't up yet, so they sent me to Korea as a military policeman. If you remember, Korea was just newly divided after the war. Japan had occupied it, and so I went over as part of the peacekeepers and served in Korea until my enlistment was up. In 1946, I was finally discharged, honorably discharged as a staff sergeant, and I quickly went back to school, then back to Kalamazoo, back to Western, and I was able to finish my degree then in 1948, that spring of 48. In 1948 then, I first interviewed here in Edwardsburg with Mr. Blanchard. He was the superintendent of schools at the time, and he was a man I really looked up to, and I still do in a way because he's buried at the top of the hill over there, so I'm still kind of looking up to him. But he was a great guy, and I was really excited to be hired here in Edwardsburg as a social studies teacher at the high school. When I first moved to Edwardsburg, I came by train into Niles, and I hitched a ride over here to Edwardsburg. I didn't have a car at the time because production of cars was halted during the war, and right after the war then in 48 they were still pretty expensive and hard to come by, so I couldn't afford one yet, so that's why I had to get here by train. I was fortunate then. I was able to rent a home. I rented a room with a family that lived on Maple Street, and then I just walked a few blocks to school every day. And the school, some of you probably remember, was located up on the corner of Section Street and 12, and it was the old consolidated school building. It was housed like K through 12, so that was the Edwardsburg school system pretty much at the time. Obviously it's changed a lot since then. I've seen a lot of growth over the years. Just to kind of put it in perspective, when I first started in 1948, the class of 49, there was only like 20 kids in the graduating class. Of course now they're graduating more like 200, close to 200 kids every year. So it's grown quite a bit. Just want to make sure I'm not skipping anything this time. So anyways, after coming here and starting, after that first year, I ended up going back that summer, and I married the love of my life, Mildred, who's buried next to me here. We were married on August 6, 1949 in Royal Oak, Michigan. And that following fall then she came with me back to Edwardsburg. And we eventually had 3 boys, Bob, John, and Dave. And I was proud of the boys. They all they went through the school system here, and then they went on to college, and they were all married and had kids and gave us great grandkids and everything. So I was very proud of them. But to finish my career at the school, and like I said, the last few years of my career I was at the high school, and I retired as a high school principal in '85. In 1985, that was kind of a satisfying year for me because that year, some of the kids, not all of them, but some of the kids graduating, they were walking out of school for the last time. They were the same kids that I welcomed to kindergarten on their first day of school all those years earlier. So it was kind of special to see them start school and then graduate. So that was like I say, that was a pretty cool year for me. The well, like I say, I just saw a lot of growth over the years. The school system's grown tremendously since I started. Some of the other things I did, there was a lot of other organizations I was involved with over the years in the community. I was involved with the Lions Club and the Legion and the Masonic Lodge, and I was on the library board for 48 years. I served as a Cub Scout leader, and I was on the village council for a while. Mildred and I were both involved with Golden Agers. We were involved with the Historical Museum, so we did a lot of things within the community. We were members of the Presbyterian Church from the early 50s until our passings. Mine was in 2012. My wife just passed 8 months after I did in 2013, May of 2013. So it was a pretty close time frame. I had a lot of blessings in my life, my family, my career, and community that I lived in. I feel like I was very fortunate. One of the blessings that I was kind of a highlight of my career was when I was inducted into the Hall of Fame, the Edwardsburg School Hall of Fame in 2008. That was a real honor for me. I also was kind of honored by the legacy that I'd left behind. I have a daughter-in-law who eventually worked at the school, taught at the school, and retired. And then her daughter, my granddaughter, she just started in Edwardsburg a couple of years ago, and now she's teaching history at the high school just like I did, almost like 75 years ago. So it's quite an honor that she's back in the district now. So if you look at the date I passed, it'll be exactly 12 years this Friday, October the 4th. It'll be 12 years since my passing. And I kind of ran out of time that day, and unfortunately I'm kind of running out of time today, so I'll let you go. But I sure appreciate you listening and coming. God bless all of you.
Thank you. You were my teacher. Do you remember me?
I remember you.
One thing we always heard about you when we were underclassmen.
What's that?
Oh, if you get in high school, you have that Mette, RT, and we'd say, what does the RT stand for? And they'd say rough test.
Rough test Mette, yep.
And it was the simplest test in the world.
That was probably Bob Boepple that started that.
He also taught driver's training for many years.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
He taught me.
Did he?
Is that right? Oh my.
Since Mr. Mette was a veteran, we will place a penny on his grave to let his family know that we were here to respect him.
It was a last minute decision.
Okay. Good one.
My name is Joanne Kerr Boepple, and I'm grateful to have been able to spend my life doing the things that I loved. I was a beloved daughter, a sister, a wife, a mom, a great, a student, a teacher, an administrator, and a leader in education, in government, and in clubs. I was born during the Great Depression on October 29th, 1935, at our home in Mishawaka to Tom and Julia Kerr. When I was 10 years old, we moved my family to a cottage on Pleasant Lake. My brother John was added to the family. I went to Edwardsburg through the 9th grade. My dad didn't want me to go to what he considered a hick school and marry a farmer. So he sent me to St. Joe in South Bend, and I graduated in 1953. Came back to Edwardsburg and married a third-generation farmer, Dick Bell, in 1956. Prior to getting married, I enrolled in St. Mary's College and stayed a year, then went on to earn my teaching certificate from Michigan Normal Training School in Dowagiac. I put off teaching for the next 8 years when I married my husband Dick and welcomed 4 children in the house we built in a new subdivision on Clare Street. Janet, Jim, John, Jill, 2 dogs and a bird made it a home. In 1964, I started teaching in Niles. I taught in a 2-room school in my classroom and had students in grades 5 through 8. In 1967, I started teaching in Edwardsburg first grade classroom. The next year, my teaching adventures really began when I started teaching in a new multi-age classroom. It was a new concept at the time, and there were no grades given out. In 1974, I became principal at Eagle Lake Elementary for 5 years. During the next several years, I was principal or assistant principal in virtually every building in the district, and even served as interim superintendent for a few months after retiring. As principal of the middle school, I boldly had the calls painted coral, the closest I could get to Eddie Orange. Starting the adult education program in the community ed department was one of the most satisfying roles I played in my career. These adults took classes during the evening after working all day, taking care of family, getting back to homework. I always had so much admiration for them. I knew all their names as I knew the names of every student in every building I taught in. While teaching in the 60s and 70s, I went to college at night and in the summer to get my bachelor's and master's degree. I never could have done that without Dick taking over the house and the kids. Even with this demanding schedule, we managed to attend all the kids' activities and volunteer where needed. In 1980, I opened the Rainbow Children's Center, daycare in some empty classrooms in the old Chicago Road building. At times, we had as many 80 kids in daycare and preschool programs. After 10 years, the school needed the space, so we had to close. In the 80s, I became a member of the Michigan Reading Association, and for over 15 years traveled the state, meeting with teachers and lecturing about the importance of reading. I had the chance to meet and get to know many Michigan authors. In 1995, I was president of that organization and planned a 3-day conference for over 4,000 Michigan reading teachers. I also joined many local run clubs, from the BPW to the Red Hats, and served as an officer in most of them. I also was on several boards of various clubs and organizations. As my children got older, I was able to travel and co-author of the state curriculum guidelines for early childhood and social studies for the Michigan Department of Education in Lansing. I helped found the Barn Swallow Theater and served on its board of directors for several years. I directed one play or musical every year for the theater or the high school. My dad was a professional musician, and try as he might, he couldn't make me one, even though I was pretty good on the piano. I really did love to sing, and often went to his gigs, where he sometimes let me sing with the band. After that, I really retired and started my 3rd act. I joined Golden Agers, some book clubs, taught classes at Western Michigan University, and spent winters in Florida with my husband and family members. The best idea came to me in 1998 at a Golden Agers Club meeting. I asked if anyone was interested in learning more about Edwardsburg history. A few people said yes, and we started the Edwardsburg Area Historical Museum with many of these same folks. I served as president until 2017. The project was one of the hardest ones I had ever taken on, and it consumed 20 years of my retirement. To create interest in the museum, I started writing Reflections, a weekly column in the Edwardsburg Argus. Every week I challenged myself to write a column about something of Edwardsburg history. I spent many years working with other volunteers to get a building and to gather valuable historical items and stories from our community. I spent countless hours searching eBay for Edwardsburg area items that were scattered across the country. I did my best to pass on my love of reading, theater, and local history to the current and future citizens, and I lived a full and happy life. And you can see that Dick and Joanne and their daughter and son, mom and dad, her mom and dad,